Start shortly. Thanks again. It's a notorious day for Bangkok traffic as usual. เอาเลยครับเอาเลยครับเจอเลยครับ Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondent Club of Thailand. My name is Prayut Wongsuwan, and I'm the president of the club. We have with us tonight a very distinguished panels. We want to hear from their thoughts and expertise, a variety of expertise, to hear their thoughts about this upcoming election for Thailand, how they frame it, how they see the dynamics, how they see what in store ahead through the election and beyond. So with us, we have our privilege to welcome former Prime Minister Abhisit Vejjajiva, who was the Prime Minister back in 2008. He's a friend of the club, has always attended many of our events in the past. Next to him, of course, we have Dr. Thitinan Phongsuthirarak, again, another friend of the club, veteran analyst from Chulalongkorn University and the former director of Institute of Security and International Studies. And we have also an old friend of the club, another friend of the club as well, Nong Main Pacharawali Thanakit Wibunpon from the People's Party movement, the youth-led protest that sprung up in 2020. And she has continued her activism through this whole election camp period. So without further ado, I want to go first to the academic of the lot, Ajahn Thitinan. Ajahn Krab, how do you frame this upcoming election? There's a lot of interest. You know, we have the House dissolution last week. We have election date set for May 14th. We have all the different parties, you know, starting campaigning, some earlier than others. We have Kun Prayut staying on. We have Pheu Thai, we have Thaksin. We have so many characters coming back. How do you frame this election for the future of Thailand, Krab?
Okay, thank you very much. ครับคุณพานุแล้วก็ good evening everyone, all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, former Prime Minister Abhisit, Kun Mai. Look, I see multiple deja vus. We've been here before, but this time I do think it will be different. If you were here, if we were talking about this 10 years ago, 20 years ago even, we were going around in circles, different circles. So first I want to talk about just a few things. One about this election, what it really means, the stakes involved, why I think it's different than other elections. I think this election is the most consequential election in my lifetime. Something different will happen. Either Thailand will continue to plateau with the signs of economic stagnation, growing political decay, or it'll perk up a bit, regain its footing, able to move ahead, regain its international standing. So that's what's at stake. I want to first make an observation that now we see heavy campaigning, lots of billboards and posters and all these parties, and they're all asking for votes, right, from the electorate, from people. They want Thai people to vote for them. We've seen this before at election time. So I do hope that they will respect the people's vote, so that after the people vote and the results are known, those results will stand and be enforced and will not be overthrown. Right? Since they're asking for the people's vote, all the parties should respect the results of the election. And that says a lot, because I think in the past we've had elections and then everybody goes out, pander, cater, looking and asking for votes, but after the vote takes place, the losers don't go home. The losers stay, and the losers eventually overthrow the system and then take over. We've seen this multiple times. So our first observation is I hope and wish that the result will be respected. It's a way of recognizing and respecting the electorate, Thai people. The stakes are very high here. When I say this is the most consequential election in my lifetime, I mean we have not had this kind of agenda platform. For the first time we have proposals to abolish the draft. This is, compulsory conscription from the Cold War years. So both Pheu Thai Party and Move Forward Party are proposing that we get rid of the draft. And I think it's overdue. They are proposing reforms of the military. Of course, Move Forward goes for the whole gamut of reforming major traditional institutions, including the monarchy, by reforming the Lèse Majesté law. And the Lèse Majesté law, 112, on 3 points. The aggrieved is the palace. The palace should be the one prosecuting, filing the charge. Honest criticisms should be tolerated, allowed. And the minimum sentence should not be 3 years. It should not be 3 to 15 years. 0 to 1 year plus fine and/or. This is for Thailand. This is revolutionary. So, to that extent, I think the policy platform was on offer now. We haven't seen this kind of agenda before. We've seen a lot of elections in Thailand, my own lifetime. We had an election in 1979, 1983, 86, 88, 92 twice. In March 92 was Kunapisit's debut, 1995, 96, and then, of course, 2001. So in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, elections came and went. Parties, came around, and after a while, they go away. Few stayed. The 1990s, more or less the same. Patronage-driven politics, elections. You had the Chun government, the first Chun government, then the Banhan for a year, then Chawlit, and the crisis in 1997, 1998. So 70s, 80s, and 90s elections, run of the mill. 2000s, 2 decades, 2000s and 2010s, elections are different. It was won by just one party every time. 2001, 2005, 2007. So it's January 2001, February 2005, December 2007, and then no election until July 2011. And then we had a coup in 2014, second one, in 21st century, after the September 2006. So election after that was 2019. So, the whole 2 decades, right, was about Thaksin getting elected and getting kicked out. And then coming back, getting elected and getting kicked out. Right? Along the way, there were 2 judicial dissolutions of the Thaksin parties. In May 2007, Thai Thai, first generation. December 2nd, 2008, Palang Pracharat People's Power Party. So 2 dissolutions of the Thaksin party. 2 military coups I mentioned, September 2006, May 2014. 2 constitutions, 2007, 2017, after 1997. So in the last 2 decades, the previous decades, elections came, went, run-of-the-mill, patronage-driven, policies didn't really matter. The last 2 decades, policies mattered, right? The last 2 decades. But it was like the Thaksin and the anti-Thaksin, the yellow shirts in 2005, 2006, and then again in 2008, and then the red shirts in 2009, 2010. And then Yingluck came in, and the yellow shirts came back again in 2013, 2014. What's different after that with the young people? Like Kun Mai and her peers, not just the yellow and red, but generational, young people reclaiming a future that they lost to these squandering politicians. So 2023, Kun Panu, I think it's going to be different. Agenda, policy proposals, different also because this time the centers of power are running out of tricks. We have seen, what have we not seen? bans on politicians, dissolutions of major political parties. For those of you who come from outside Thailand, imagine your largest, biggest, most established party being disbanded. We had 2 military coups. Manipulation, distortion, rewriting the constitution to have an appointed Senate, right, to select Prime Minister. So 2023, I think that the margins will be the key. So the margins, I mean, if you look at, 2000, in the 1990s, very kind of close, but 2000 and 2010s, the margins were pretty convincing and pretty clear-cut. 2001, the Pheu Thai Party won 248 out of 500. 2005, February, 377 out of 500. December 2007, 232 out of 480. Right. 34 on the party list. The Democrats had 33 in the party list. But overall, they had 232 out of 480. Yingluck, the Thaksin sister, in 2011, 265 out of 500. And then the coup, eventually, 2019, 136. This is the lowest they've got, Pheu Thai. They were still the largest winning party, number one party in March 2019, but did not get a chance to form a coalition. So it fell to the Palang Pracharat Party at 116. Now, the margin at that time, with 20 MP difference, you can shave, you can manipulate. And you do that by dissolving the Future Forward Party. You notice that, it doesn't take long-time observers to see what's happening here. All the referee agencies are one-sided. The rules are rigged. But the people rigging the rules still cannot win the election. Right? And that says a lot about the Thai electorate that has been changing. Right? So 2019, of course, with the Future Forward dissolution, eventually in February 2020, but the MP shaving by the ostensible referee agencies led by the Election Commission, the Constitutional Court, the Anti-Corruption Commission, Anti-Money Laundering, all these agencies appointed during the coup period, the military coup period, they've been deciding in one way, and that's evident. So now, this time, the margin is likely to be higher, a lot higher. If you have a margin of 50 plus, even 100 between the largest winning party and the second largest winning party, how do you manipulate, distort, and subvert that outcome? And I said, sometimes I wonder, what other tricks have we not seen? They will dissolve party again? Dissolve Pheu Thai? Can. They're all the parties have charges. Dissolve, move forward again? Can. I've done it before. Seize power by the military, cost very high, possible, eventually possible. But I'm just thinking that this time, the centers of power are cornered. After 2 decades, 2 military coups, rewrote 2 constitutions, dissolve major parties, ban all kinds of politicians from the opposing side. This time now, I think they're on course to lose the election, which means that the Pheu Thai is feeling pretty strongly. Going back 20 years, right? And those of us, some of us in the room will know this very well. The Thaksin administration, the Thaksin era had a lot of problems. Corruption, conflicts of interest, cronyism, and I can go over a long list of buying planes, A340s to fly certain routes just to get a commission on the planes, satellite concessions, and on and on. And there are books written about it, articles and so on. We have John Chris Baker is in the room too. You can read his book, The Business of Politics, right? So that was the Thaksin era. 2 decades since, we've seen the Thaksin opponents not being much better. In fact, all the same. I mean, there's corruption. It's just less accountable and unaccountable. Remember Thaksin hid his assets, right? He hid his assets under the names of the driver and the gardener and the cook or whatever. But he had to report and declare the assets. General Prayut doesn't declare his assets. Thaksin is convicted for overseeing, while Prime Minister, sale of a piece of land that his wife bought. General Prayut sold his family land to a big tycoon offshore, unaccounted for. Right? So the point is that over the last 20 years, I've seen it all. I've seen the Thaksin opponents, everything. So I'm at a point now, after, this is why I think it's consequential and very important to me, this election. I think it will go in a certain direction. And I think that a lot of us will think, look, we want Thailand back. We want Thailand to move forward. No wonder, no doubt, the young people are seeing it this way. Squandering politicians, all with cronyism, collusion, corruption, conflicts of interest, all kinds of scandals. I mean, this current administration, or the Navy, submarines, or the F-16s, storing ashes, completely unaccountable. Military budget been going up to nowhere. So we've seen all of this, and so I think this election now, we want the results to count, and we want Thailand to move forward, and we'll keep tackling corruption with the legitimately elected government. This time, I think the old tricks might not work the same way. Just a final comment. So if you look at the scenarios, all the parties are populist now. I had to say to the Thaksin opponents, and how did you do this? I mean, you had 20 years, right? In the last decade, since the May 2014 coup, you had Thailand under complete control. Article 44, absolute authority, ran Thailand to the ground. How could Thaksin still be appealing? How could Pheu Thai Party still be on course to win the election? Gross incompetence of the adversaries and opponents and enemies, and willful neglect, self-denial. They never were able to face up to the Thaksin wake-up call, which meant that the vast majority of the Thai electorate wanted a better tomorrow. They wanted a chance. That's why the so-called populist policy sold so well. And now it's not the red shirts, the people in the northeast and north and so on. It's the young people now. So it's really a double whammy. Good luck to them. I think that they really have been grossly incompetent. Could have done anything with Thailand over the last 2 decades. 2 coups, 2 constitutions, Article 44. And on this ignorance and failure and ineptitude and incompetence, we have Pheu Thai now on course to win the election again. And this time you can see, when all the parties are populist, it's like you are conceding that Thaksin has won, right? Why would you be populist? What? And the most remarkable party is this far-right, overtly royalist party called the Thai Party. They want to have electricity subsidy, right? I mean, all parties are populist. So populism this time, to me, will not be the decisive factor in determining the election outcome. When all parties are populist doesn't mean as much. And when all parties are populist, Pheu Thai benefits more because it was the original populist party, and it had a first mover advantage. And basically, this is an admission of defeat. So the margin this time will be large. And when the margin is large, I don't know what tricks they can come up with, apart from dissolving parties again, ban politicians again. But of course, when you dissolve a party, you have protests. for sure. You're disenfranchising people. Military coup, don't see it. So I think what will happen is that Pheu Thai is on course to win, it's going to win. All things being equal, I think you can look at the referee agencies, look at the signals, look at the maneuvers. I'm sure they are conferring about what to do. They must be very alarmed. And the referee agencies are going to come up with some fishy business, some tricks, but won't be enough to overturn the result. I think the result will be convincing. And I think they will do what they did in 2007, 2008, and again in 2013-14, which is to put up with the winning government and then overthrow them later. This time, I'm not sure it'll be so easy. It will not be so straightforward. So let's leave it at that. I think that there's a lot of excitement in the air for good reasons. The bar is so low. We've suffered so much damage has been done. There's a lot of upside. So I hope we'll get a government that people have elected and a government that can move Thailand forward relative to the rest of the region and relative to itself from its recent past. Thank you.
Thank you, Prayut Chan. Next we'll go to Nong Mine, who will be speaking in Thai, but I will help her translate. So bear with me. I will not translate exactly what she said, but I'll summarize it. So Mine ครับมองการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้เป็นยังไง How do you see this election from your point of view?
ต้องขออภัยที่ขออนุญาตพูดเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้ค่ะในมุมมองของภาคประชาชนหมายคิดว่าทุกคนเห็นตรงกันว่ามันคือจุดสำคัญที่เราต้องให้ความสนใจเป็นอย่างมากเพื่อให้การเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้มันเป็นไปตามเจตจำนงของประชาธิปไตยให้ได้มากที่สุด
So for this election, in my view, and the views of sort of the people's and sort of the people around me see is that the one thing that we have to focus is that the election has to be the most democratic.
เราหวังว่าเราอยากจะเห็นการเลือกตั้งที่โปร่งใสและเป็นธรรมแล้วก็เป็นกลไกที่สามารถนำพาความคาดหวังของคนส่วนใหญ่ในประเทศคน 99% ในประเทศเพื่อที่เขาจะได้หลุดพ้นจากการอดอยากจากการถูกจำกัดโอกาสไม่ให้พวกเขาได้ลืมตาอ้าปากได้
We hope that to see the election that is transparent and fair so that it would lead to the betterment of 99% of the population, you know, having better lives, having sort of more prosperous lives.
ที่เราต้องฝันแบบนี้อะค่ะเพราะว่าการเลือกตั้งเมื่อปี 62 ที่ผ่านมาถูกจัดขึ้นโดยรัฐบาลที่เป็นทหารและอยู่ภายใต้กรอบกฎหมายที่รัฐบาลทหารนั้นกำหนดขึ้นมาภายใต้รัฐธรรมนูญ 60 ที่พวกเราไม่ได้มีโอกาสร่วมในการที่จะร่างรัฐธรรมนูญ 60 ที่มีเนื้อหาในการกำหนดไว้ว่ากลุ่มคนของพวกเขาเท่านั้นที่มีอำนาจในการจัดการการเปลี่ยนแปลงของรัฐธรรมนูญหรือแม้แต่อำนาจต่างๆที่อยู่ในรัฐธรรมนูญ
So we need this hope because in 2019 that election was hosted by the military regime under the rules they have written under the 2017 constitution that the people did not have any degree of participation. So we need to focus.
อยากจะยกตัวอย่างให้ฟังค่ะว่าในรัฐธรรมนูญ 60 นี้กำหนดอะไรไว้บ้างรัฐธรรมนูญ 60 นี้กำหนดให้มีวุฒิสภา 250 คนที่มีอำนาจล้นเกินประชาชนพวกเขามีอำนาจในการโหวตเลือกนายกค่ะและสว250 คนนี้ไม่ต้องยืนยันตรงนี้เลยค่ะว่าพวกเขาไม่ได้มีส่วนที่มาจากประชาชนเลยมีเพียงแค่คณะรัฐประหารเท่านั้นที่แต่งตั้งพวกเขาทั้ง250 คนขึ้นมาแล้วก็ให้อำนาจเยอะแยะมากมายอย่างแรกที่พูดไปเมื่อกี้คือเรื่องของการยกมือโหวตเลือกนายกอย่างที่สองที่สำคัญคือให้อำนาจในการแก้ไขรัฐธรรมนูญที่เป็นเครื่องมือในการบริหารประเทศของประชาชน
In 2017 Constitution, one of the key things is the 250-seat appointed Senate chosen by the military and did not come. They have also the ability to choose the Prime Minister, even though none of them was chosen by the public. And secondly, they also have the power to fix the Constitution.
รวมถึงวุฒิสภา 250 คนยังมีอำนาจในการเสนอแนะในการแต่งตั้งองค์กรอิสระอย่างเช่นศาลรัฐธรรมนูญและสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดค่ะคือคณะกรรมการการเลือกตั้งหรือกกต.ซึ่งเป็นคนที่จะต้องมีความเป็นกลางมากที่สุดในการอำนวยการเลือกตั้ง กลไกที่มันจะเป็นประชาธิปไตยให้เกิดขึ้นอย่างโปร่งใสและเป็นธรรมให้ได้
And the most important thing about that the Senate also have the power, have the voice, have the say in the appointment of these so-called independent agencies like the Constitutional Court or the Election Commission, the electoral body that have to be neutral, they are the most neutral, refereeing this election.
ซึ่งมันชัดเจนมากค่ะว่าในครั้งนี้ทำไมการเลือกตั้งถึงเป็นส่วนสำคัญมากๆที่พวกเราต้องช่วยกันจับตาดูเป็นอย่างยิ่งเพราะว่าเรายังอยู่ในรัฐธรรมนูญฉบับเดิมค่ะรัฐธรรมนูญ60ที่พวกเราไม่ได้มีส่วนในการร่างเรายังอยู่กับสว250คนที่เราไม่ได้เลือกมาแต่เขายังมีอำนาจในการโหวตเลือกนายกเรายังอยู่ภายใต้คณะกรรมการการเลือกตั้งชุดเดิมที่ถูกแต่งตั้งมาจากคณะรัฐประหารเราไม่สามารถที่จะไว้วางใจได้เลยค่ะว่าการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้จะเป็นไปอย่างโปร่งใสและเป็นธรรมจริงๆแต่เราก็คาดหวังว่าการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้จะมีประสิทธิภาพให้ได้มากที่สุดผ่านการจับตาการเลือกตั้งจากของฝั่งประชาชนเพื่อให้การเปลี่ยนผ่านอำนาจการเปลี่ยนผ่านรัฐบาลในครั้งนี้มันเป็นความคาดหวังให้ได้จากของประชาชนด้วยค่ะ
It is very clear that this is the election that we have to be extra scrutinizing it. We still under the same constitution that people did not participate. We still have the 250 senators who none of the people have chosen but still have the power to choose the prime minister. And we still have the same election commission appointed by the military. Essentially, we don't believe that the election will be free and fair, but we have to scrutinize it so that it will be, that the result will be sort of on par with what the people have voiced.
ในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้สิ่งที่น่าจับตาดูอีกอย่างหนึ่งคือเรื่องของพรรคการเมืองค่ะเราจะเห็นการแข่งขันกันของพรรคการเมืองทั้งรูปแบบเก่าและรูปแบบใหม่รูปแบบเก่าที่อาจจะใช้วิธีการสร้างความเชื่อมั่นให้กับตัวพรรคหรือตัวบุคคลส่วนรูปแบบใหม่ที่เราเห็นกันในครั้งนี้อย่างแพร่หลายมากๆเลยก็คือการชูเรื่องของนโยบายว่ามันจะตอบโจทย์กับพี่น้องประชาชนคนไทยได้มากน้อยแค่ไหน
In this election also we have to look at the parties and there's new and old parties. The old ways, the party build trust on the party and the people, the candidates, and new ways that we are seeing emerging is that party focusing on policies and how that can affect change.
ส่วนนั้นอาจจะเป็นที่พี่น้องประชาชนคนไทยก็ต้องมองดูและตัดสินกันว่าเขาอยากที่จะเลือกได้อยากที่จะได้ผู้แทนของเขาแบบไหนอย่างไรแต่ในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้ค่ะแต่ละพรรคการเมืองเริ่มให้ความสำคัญกับการชูนโยบายมากขึ้นการพูดถึงคำสัญญาที่เขาต้องให้กับประชาชนให้ได้ว่าเขาจะเปลี่ยนแปลงหรือแก้ไขอะไรบ้างหลังจากที่เขาได้เป็นรัฐบาลไปแล้วสิ่งที่หลายๆคนคาดหวังอย่างที่บอกไปตอนต้นค่ะว่าประชาชน 99% ในประเทศอยากจะหลุดพ้นจากความอดอยากจะหลุดพ้นจากการถูกกดขี่เพราะฉะนั้นนโยบายมีส่วนสำคัญในการที่พวกเขาจะตัดสินใจเป็นอย่างมากในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้ค่ะ
It's up to the people who they want, but we see right now that each parties are emphasizing more and more on policies and promising changes to come if they are voted into government. But what I have said before, 99% of the people that want to be free from the control, they have high expectation, from this particular vote.
ในช่วงปี 2563 ตั้งแต่ช่วงประมาณต้นปีมีการยุบพรรคอนาคตใหม่ซึ่งส่วนนั้นเป็นฟางเส้นสุดท้ายแต่ไม่ใช่เหตุผลทั้งหมดนะคะที่ทำให้เกิดการเคลื่อนไหวของคนรุ่นใหม่อย่างแพร่หลายเป็นอย่างมากเกิดการลุกฮือขึ้นในการหวงแหนสิทธิ์ของตัวเองในฐานะพลเมืองไทยกลุ่มคนรุ่นใหม่ได้มีข้อเสนออย่างชัดเจนหลายข้อและหลายข้อนั้นพุ่งตรงไปถึงโครงสร้างอำนาจที่อยู่ในประเทศไทยนี้ซึ่งตอนนี้เองก็ยังคงมีข้อถกเถียงเหล่านั้นอยู่ในประเทศค่ะแล้วมันทำให้เกิดข้อเสนอหลายอย่างมากที่เราเองก็อยากจะได้รับจุดยืนจากพรรคการเมืองด้วยเช่นเดียวกันว่าผ่านตามข้อเสนอเหล่านี้พรรคการเมืองจะสามารถตอบโจทย์อะไรให้พวกเราได้บ้าง
In 2020, there was a lot of things that had happened. At the beginning of the year, early on in the year, there was a dissolution of Future Forward Party. It was a factor, not the only factor, but it was a factor that led to the youth protest later in that year. And people, young people, growing more concerns about their rights as citizens. That led to the youth movement made many demands, some addressing structural changes to the country. And these demands have to be answered, and we are waiting to hear from political parties what they say about these demands.
ขออนุญาตยกตัวอย่างข้อเสนอที่เป็นข้อถกเถียงในสังคมตอนนี้นะคะอย่างแรกค่ะอย่างเช่นเรื่องของรัฐธรรมนูญ 60 ที่เป็นปัญหามากๆเลยในการบริหารประเทศแต่ละพรรคการเมืองจะมีกลไกในการแก้ไขเพื่อร่างใหม่หรือไม่อย่างไรหมายคิดว่าส่วนนี้เป็นส่วนสำคัญมากๆค่ะที่จะให้พี่น้องประชาชนคนไทยได้ตัดสินใจว่าเขาจะอยากเลือกพรรคไหนดีเพื่อที่จะให้ตัวเองหลุดจากกรอบโครงสร้างที่พวกเขาไม่ได้เป็นคนร่วมกำหนดแบบนี้
So, for example, the 2017 Constitution is one of the many demands that the students, the youth-led group has made about changes. We want to hear what each parties have to say in the way to address, to fix the Constitution or what process they have and how. This is in many ways will affect the way people vote.
ตัวอย่างที่2ค่ะเนื่องจากตั้งแต่ปี 63 เป็นต้นมาจริงๆแล้วต้องนับย้อนไปตั้งแต่ปี 57 ที่เกิดการรัฐประหารเลยด้วยซ้ำเกิดคดีทางการเมืองในประเทศที่บอกว่าตัวเองเป็นประชาธิปไตยเยอะแยะมากมายในช่วง 63 ที่ผ่านมามีจำนวนนักโทษทางการเมืองผู้ต้องหาทางการเมืองเพิ่มขึ้นเป็นพัน 2,000 คนข้อเสนอที่สังคมพยายามถามต่อพรรคการเมืองณตอนนี้อย่างหนึ่งก็คือการนิรโทษกรรมคดีทางการเมืองพรรคไหนอยากจะผลักดันให้เกิดขึ้นไหมอย่างไรเพราะในสังคมที่เป็นประชาธิปไตยแท้จริงแล้วไม่ควรที่จะมีคดีทางการเมืองเกิดขึ้นค่ะ
The second part, since 2020, but also all the way back to 2014, the coup, there have been a large number of political prisoners, thousands, up to 2,000 political prisoners. One of the demands that the youth want to see is amnesty for these political prisoners, and want to hear what political parties think about this idea of amnesty, because in a truly democratic society, we should not have these political prisoners.
และตัวอย่างสุดท้ายที่จะยกให้ทุกท่านได้ฟังค่ะนั่นคือข้อถกเถียงเรื่องของกลไกในการป้องกันการรัฐประหารการรัฐประหารในประเทศไทยเราเกิดหลายครั้งมากจนทำให้ประเทศไทยไม่มีเสถียรภาพในการบริหารบ้านเมืองการรัฐประหารในทุกๆครั้งมันทำให้เศรษฐกิจเราหยุดชะงักจนทำให้ประชาชนหลายคนไม่สามารถลืมตาอ้าปากได้ในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้สิ่งที่สังคมอยากจะให้พรรคการเมืองแสดงจุดยืนของตัวเองออกมาและแสดงกลไกออกมานั่นก็คือว่ามีกลไกอย่างไรในการป้องกันไม่ให้การรัฐประหารนั้นเกิดขึ้นอีกจะมีกลไกอย่างไรหรือไม่ในการที่จะให้คนที่เคยทำรัฐประหารนั้นที่จริงแล้วพวกเขาเหล่านั้นคือกบฏได้กลับมาชดใช้ในสิ่งที่พวกเขาได้ทำไว้ด้วยเช่นเดียวกันค่ะ
Lastly, we want to hear more about the mechanism from the party to protect against future military coups. Military coups have led to stagnation and many problems in our country. And in this election, we want to hear what each party have to say in terms of what they have in terms of mechanism to protect against the coup and also help those that orchestrate coup in the past accountable for their actions.
ข้อเสนอทั้ง3อันที่ได้ยกตัวอย่างไปนี้เป็นทั้งข้อเสนอและเป็นทั้งข้อถกเถียงที่เกิดขึ้นในสังคมไทยในตลอดช่วงระยะประมาณ3ปีที่ผ่านมาค่ะและถ้าหากรัฐบาลใหม่ไม่สามารถที่จะแก้ไขปัญหาหรือว่าตอบข้อเสนอส่วนนี้ได้หรือตอบปัญหาส่วนนี้ได้หมายคิดว่ามันอาจจะสร้างความขัดแย้งที่ต่อเนื่องในภายหลังเนื่องจากทางรัฐเองไม่มีกลไกในการตอบประชาชนถึงสิ่งที่พวกเขาสงสัยและไม่มีกลไกในการบอกกับสังคมว่าเขาจะทำให้เกิดเสถียรภาพทางการเมืองในประเทศไทยได้อย่างไรนี่เลยเป็นสิ่งที่หมายถึงบอกค่ะว่าการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้ถึงสำคัญอย่างมากและเหมือนเป็นจุดเปลี่ยนหนึ่งเลยว่าทำไมเราถึงต้องให้ความสนใจกับมันแล้วเราจะคาดหวังกับสังคมในอนาคตได้มากแค่ไหนก็คงขึ้นอยู่กับการเลือกตั้งในครั้งนี้ค่ะ
These are the demands that have been debated by the public for the past 3 years. And if the new government comes in and can't answer these demands, it will further lead to more conflict and destabilization. A government that have no mechanism to address people's concerns would not last very long. And this is why this election is so consequential for me and my fellow activists.
นี่ถึงส่งต่อเนื่องมาค่ะว่าในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้จะเกิดการจับตาการเลือกตั้งครั้งที่ใหญ่ที่สุดครั้งหนึ่งในประวัติศาสตร์ไทยโดยภาคประชาชนซึ่งทุกท่านอาจจะเห็นสีเขียวๆที่อยู่ทางด้านหน้าไมค์ตรงนี้แล้วก็อยากจะ ฝากแคมเปญ Protect Our Vote ค่ะพวกเราตั้งใจอย่างมากในการที่จะให้ประชาชนมีส่วนร่วมในการจับตาการเลือกตั้งในครั้งนี้ให้ได้มากที่สุดเป็นส่วนหนึ่งในการช่วยกันตรวจทานเพื่อที่จะไม่ให้เกิดกลโกงเกิดกลเม็ดที่มันอยู่นอกเหนือความเป็นประชาธิปไตยเกิดขึ้นในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้ค่ะก็ในช่วงแรกขอทิ้งไว้เท่านี้ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
So this election will be heavily scrutinized. As you can see on my left, this is the pamphlet, and there's a QR code there for Protect Our Vote campaign, where the youth group and other activist group have joined together, and they're going to raise volunteers to monitor the election. This is me explaining more than what you said, so that people can have a higher degree of participation in focusing on this election. Thank you. Well. Thank you so much, Kun Main. Well, we go lastly to the only politician in our panel, Kun Apisit. How do you see this coming vote? I mean, you've seen it all yourself. You've been through this. What Ajahn Thitinan said from the 90s, you've seen it all. How do you see this upcoming vote? And you know, I want to pick your brain here as a former leader of this country. How can any government go forward with this conflict intensifying?
Thank you for having me on the panel. I should start with a disclaimer.
Please.
I am not running in this election, but I remain a member of the Democrat Party. So I'm not sure whether you're right in saying I'm the only politician on this panel. I see myself as, let's say, taking a sabbatical from politics. The second thing is, I can't help thinking, but I'm sure there's no lack of effort to try to get somebody on behalf of the government to come here. But apparently they choose not to use this platform. But let me start by saying that I hope that in the case of Kun Main, who is going to be doing her best with her colleagues to make sure that these elections are as free and fair as possible, and that the decision of the people will be respected. I hope that they achieve that, and I'm sure they know that they will run up against quite considerable obstacles. But I am pleased to see that young people are now very politically active, and they have a clear vision of what they want for their future, and that they're not just sitting at home, but trying to do something about it. I was also struck by Ajahn Thitinan saying that this is the most consequential election, because usually it's the politicians who say that when they're asking for your vote. But I might take a slightly different view, trying to assess the situation in a realistic manner as possible. Beginning first by saying that it's clear that the political landscape remains very polarized, and so with the exception of General Prawit's move, pretty much all the parties are entrenched in the same side that they have been, and there have been very little effort in trying to bridge the gap between the two sides, and hardly anybody switching side. And so I think the frame as we go into these elections for most people remains about which side you are on. And for me, that's a disappointment, because we're at a stage where this country really needs structural reforms. Economically, we have been trapped in middle income. We've not been able to take advantage of technology. And truth be told, over the last 5-6 years, we are probably at the bottom of the league in ASEAN in terms of economic growth and recovering from COVID. We are an aged society already and continues to age fast, which means that we have a big problem, not just economically, but also in terms of the inadequacy of our welfare system. And I think, in particular, young people are very anxious that they are going to grow up in a very uncertain world without any kind of security guaranteed as far as their livelihood is concerned, not to mention what their grandmothers and grandfathers will have to go through. There's an incredibly high degree of inequality, which is clearly structural, and you need more than just bits and pieces here and there as policies to address this inequality. I could go on. There are so many structural challenges. So in one way, when I say, well, these elections are not going to be so consequential, is I don't see these issues being addressed, whatever the outcome of the elections. Because looking at the posters along the roads, yes, there's quite a lot of competition on populist policies. Some might address some of the issues that I've mentioned, but hardly any discussion in a systematic way or any meaningful dialogue to tackle these issues. Having said that, and having been a politician for 30 years, I can understand why political parties are still trapped in this. Despite what Ajahn Thitinan has said about some novel ideas, although not all of them are new, frankly, there are issues such as the monarchy, which only the Move Forward is prepared to talk about, while the others are clearly saying that they are non-committal on the issue. And so it suggests to me that if you wanted some kind of, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but fairly drastic changes after the elections, I don't see that coming. And then I will now say also why that is the case, including perhaps suggesting to Ajahn Thitinan that some trickery may be evolving, but perhaps not just by one side, but on both sides. So if this were any other country in a fairly well-established democracy, I think anyone analyzing the elections would have a very easy job. Because if you think back 4 years ago, General Prayut only managed to get half the number of MPs to vote for him in Parliament. That's after a very bizarre way of calculating how many MPs each party should get. So that allowed in about 10, 15 MPs from small parties which didn't even win more than 100,000 votes. Whereas some parties, after the allocation, already had about 200,000, 100,000 votes left, but didn't get a seat. So even 4 years ago, you started from a situation where, vote-wise, General Prayut didn't even have a majority. And that was also under an electoral system which was designed to fragment Parliament. So even if you had the same votes 4 years ago, and you changed the electoral system, like they have done now, I can't see the current coalition winning a majority. But that was 4 years ago. Since then, it is clear that the tide of public opinion has shifted towards the opposition. We see that from the local election results in Bangkok, upcountry. We see that in all the credible opinion polls, where there are standard answers, correct methodology, which now suggest that the opposition as a bloc would clearly have a big majority. I don't know if anybody would put money on the coalition, the current coalition, winning a majority. I don't think I can find anybody who would do that. Okay? And as I said, if that were in any other country, it looks like we're just going to transfer power from the current coalition to the opposition bloc. But then you have to notice a few developments. The first is that for some reason over the last few months, the Pheu Thai Party, who is clearly going to be the biggest party and is by all accounts going to win more than 200 seats, if not more than 250. Whereas the next biggest party would be lucky to even get 100. This is what all the opinion polls are suggesting. But instead of Pheu Thai signaling clearly that it will stick with the current opposition bloc, we instead see a distancing of Pheu Thai Party, particularly from the Move Forward Party. And as somebody who privately predicted that this would happen 2 years ago and got laughed at, the reason I made this prediction privately to a number of people 2 years ago is because I believe that the Pheu Thai is still stuck with its old agenda of bringing Thaksin home. And I think Thaksin has recognized that simply winning an election will not allow him to do that. And so he has to look for compromises, if you like, or somehow extending an alliance that will allow him to come home. At the same time, you suddenly notice that General Prawit, all of a sudden, over the last month or so, started talking about reconciliation and that he would be the one that will bridge all sides together. And, of course, then people started pointing out that, well, maybe a Pheu Thai General Prawit coalition is on the cards. And I still today have not heard an outright denial from either side. But through pressure from their supporters and so on, they will be saying it's the last choice or last resort that could happen, not their preference. But it seems to me that is still how this is going to likely play out. And it's not because of General Prawit's sudden change of mind about where he stands in politics, but because we still have that Article 272 in place, where for Pheu Thai to get over the line and get a prime minister, they still need 375 votes. And no, I'm not saying General Prawit is going to have 100 or something MPs, no. But General Prawit is thought to have maybe up to 100 senators that he could influence. So maybe Ajahn Thitinan might look out for this trick that is happening from these players. So my point is this. If I had to call out, Pheu Thai will win the elections. They will win big. They might even win an absolute majority in the lower house. And despite the senators having that power to elect a prime minister, if Pheu Thai and its allies have more than 250 votes, the Senate, whoever they choose as prime minister that do not get the consent of the opposition bloc, will not be able to have a government that can last. The only thing that they can do is to just put the country in a continuous deadlock if they still want to deny the choice of the Pheu Thai Party. And for me, that's just asking for trouble. because of the intense public pressure that would follow an election where people, the majority of people, would feel that their wishes have been denied by the system. All right? So my point is this, that if that is the case, the most likely scenario is, well, we might see some kind of compromise that draws General Prawit and Pheu Thai into a coalition to facilitate Pheu Thai's agenda. And if that's the case, well, we have a government that's born out of political convenience. I think General Prawit has shown that he is smart or smarter than people give him credit for by now clearly positioning himself whereby if through some trickery the old coalition wins, he would still be part of government. But if somehow Pheu Thai wins but cannot get over the line, he will also be part of the next government. You know, when General Prawit split from General Prayut, I have a foreign friend here who was very puzzled and asked me, you know, it doesn't seem to make sense that the two uncles are going separate ways when they've amended the constitution with the electoral system. Is he missing something? And I said, no, he didn't miss anything. I mean, this was something that was engineered and designed by General Prawit from the start. And poor General Prayut sort of really understood it when it was too late. And for him to return, that is a monumental task, because he will only come back by, first of all, having the current coalition win the majority in the lower house, which will be very difficult. Number two, even if they did, his will not be the biggest party in the bloc either. And so people will ask why Kun Anutin would have to give the job to General Prayut when Anutin's party is likely bigger in the bloc. And I know some people who Ajahn Thitinan talks about, you know, performing these tricks. Some are still hoping that, well, maybe get the senators and just 125 MPs to vote General Prayut in, and then get some more MPs on board the way they've done over the last 4 years. But it's going to take a huge number of defections to get a stable government. So I can't see it happening unless you're really asking for trouble. Which brings me to the very last point, and that is, well, if this is going to be a truly consequential election, you just have to hope that the new government, consisting maybe of Pheu Thai, maybe of Palang Pracharat, or maybe, I may be wrong, Pheu Thai and the opposition bloc can form a government, that they really do take up all the issues that the two other panelists are saying, and not just return to the old ways. After all, if you're asking why Pheu Thai is going to win so big, what is driving the support? Well, I can tell you that the people that are giving the Pheu Thai the most votes are General Prayut and the senators. Because people are sick and tired of 8 years of General Prayut up and down the country, and people want to show the senators that they have the power, not the appointed 250 people. But sending Pheu Thai into government on this feeling is not telling you exactly how Pheu Thai is going to run the country and which direction it will go. And I keep saying, and challenging in a way, with very strong rebuttals from the Pheu Thai Party about whether they've learned the lessons of their old ways, which have led to the deterioration of their governments in the past. I have to disagree slightly with Ajahn Thitinan when he says that, you know, let's say in 2011, Pheu Thai won the elections and the losers never went away. It is not true. On the night of the election, I was head of the losing party, I gave a clear speech of concession even before all the votes were counted. And I was very clear that Kun Yingluck then had the mandate to lead the country. With massive flooding and all that, nothing was going to destabilize her government. She was still on course to win another election. It was only after she introduced the amnesty bill that all the trouble started. That is why my concern remains. I remember when Pheu Thai said that Thaksin's daughter, Kun Paetongtarn, was going to run in the elections and asked me of my opinion. I said, if she's chosen by the party, if people elect the party, she has every right and legitimacy to lead the country, whatever you may think of her. But my concern is, has she learned the lesson from Kun Yingluck? Has she learned the lesson from Kun Thaksin that if the agenda of the government will be about the family interests, the country will be back in trouble? Maybe not as much as 10 years ago because there's a lot of fatigue, but there will be considerable opposition if that were done. And of all the rebuttals that came to me from Pheu Thai from that day to today, which is more than half a year now, I think, never once did Pheu Thai say that they will not think about amnesty or bring Thaksin home, which would have been the most powerful rebuttal to what I said, so that the case would be closed. And I got even more worried from Kun Thaksin's statement a few days ago, because he said that he would now be willing to come back and be put in jail or whatever, but that's not what caught my attention. He said one sentence, and that was, he has told his daughter not to give in to Pheu Thai's party to try to pass the amnesty bill. So even Thaksin is saying that Pheu Thai has amnesty on the agenda, but he will do his best to convince his daughter not to give in to what Pheu Thai is trying to do. Do you believe she would succeed? Do you believe that, well, you have to believe Thaksin also when he says that he cannot influence the Pheu Thai party. So that's my worry. I hope I'm wrong. I think whatever the elections turn out to be, my wish first of all is there are none of the usual tricks about disbanding parties, about trying to buy MPs to defect, about trying to create gridlock by not voting for a prime minister with Green. I want the party to win the election to get a chance to form a government and move the country forward. But then my other wish, of course, is that they have learned the lesson. If it is indeed a new and a change of government, that they have learned the lessons of the past and won't take Thailand back. Only in that way can the country really move forward. And if we succeed in doing that, I believe there will be new alignments taking place in Thai politics, which I think will be good. In particular, I think the young people with their agenda will have parties that can represent their interests more clearly and shift some of the political dialogue onto the issues that matter to them. I guess the unlucky thing about the Move Forward Party this time is that the electoral system is working against them, so that even if they retain or even increase their support from the last elections, it is likely that they will end up with fewer seats than what they had before dissolution. And of course, in the dynamics of the elections, the other thing that I think will inevitably happen is with all the tactical voting, you will see that as you move closer and closer to elections, that many Move Forward voters, potential voters, might decide to shift to Pheu Thai to make sure that they get that majority. And many of the coalition parties will have their supporters also move to Prayut's party for fear that Prayut also will not have enough votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kap. We're going to go. We're going to go to the Q&A in a second at the mic at the back of the room. But I want to ask the three of you some questions first, just a short one. Kun Abhisit, I just want to pick up where you left off. You personally know Kun Prayut, Kun Prawit personally. You know these people. You know how they think.
Well,
going into this election, you know.
It's always hard to know what people who don't think like you think. But
Okay, but people like them, not just them, but people behind the scene, others, are they more concerned about Kun Thaksin right now, or are they more concerned about this younger, newer force that has emerged? I mean, I'm not talking about just the election. I'm talking about politics in general. Are they, you know, in the last 20 years, it seems that this Thaksin is the sort of, you know, it's the ultimate enemy. You think that in their point of view, you think the younger generation is more of a threat now? What do you?
Well, I'll take General Prayut first. Okay, he's someone who genuinely believes that he is the man to protect the key institutions of this country. And from that point of view, I think he sees the younger generations who talk about monarchy reforms as a bigger threat to Thaksin, especially if Thaksin will compromise for his own interests by denying the agenda of the Move Forward Party, which is what is being suspected in their distancing themselves from the Move Forward Party. So I think that's clear for General Prayut. I think General Prawit just thinks this is an opportunity for him.
Okay. น้อง Mine คำถามเดียวคล้ายๆกัน same similar question from your point of view with the youth, you know เมื่อกี้ทุกคนพูดถึงคุณทักษิณเป็นโจทย์ใหญ่ในการเลือกตั้งคนรุ่นใหม่เองมองคุณทักษิณยังไง how do young people see Thaksin? I mean, you know, we're going to this election, a lot of the talk, a lot of the conversation is about Thaksin because he still matters. What do younger people think about คุณทักษิณ
เราคงปฏิเสธไม่ได้อะค่ะว่าคุณทักษิณเองก็คงมีอิทธิพลทางการเมืองไม่น้อยนะคะไม่ว่าจะพรรคไหนก็ตาม คือเมื่อไหร่ที่เขาพูดเนี่ยแต่ละคนก็มักจะมีกระแสตอบโต้อะไรบางอย่างออกมาอยู่เสมอแต่ว่าในส่วนของคนรุ่นใหม่เองอะค่ะหมายคิดว่าหลายๆคนคิดเห็นตรงกันว่าเราให้น้ำหนักกับการพูดถึงนโยบายหรือหนทางในการแก้ปัญหามากซะกว่าการฟาดฟันกันไปมาของนักการเมืองในลักษณะเดิมๆเพราะเรารู้สึกว่าการฟาดฟันกันในลักษณะนั้นเนี่ยส่วนใหญ่แล้วมันไม่ได้ตั้งอยู่บนผลประโยชน์ของประชาชนเลยแต่มันตั้งอยู่บนผลประโยชน์ของพวกเขากันเอง
So we can't deny that Thaksin is still very influential, and every time he says something, there will always be reactions. But for young people now, I think we are more focused on policy rather than the personal fight, because that's the old politics. We want policies that actually change things.
เพราะฉะนั้นหลายๆคนก็ถกเถียงกันเยอะมากค่ะว่าคุณทักษิณจะกลับมาหรือไม่จะกลับมาแล้วจะอย่างไรต่อไปส่วนตัวมาเองมาคิดว่าเขาจะกลับมาหรือไม่กลับมานั่นก็เป็นสิทธิ์ของเขาเนาะส่วนพรรคการเมืองที่เสนอตัวอยากจะเป็นผู้แทนของประชาชนในการเลือกตั้งครั้งนี้คุณก็ต้องแสดงจุดยืนแล้วก็แสดงความการนำเสนอตัวเองอะค่ะว่าคุณจะเป็นผู้แทนของประชาชนอย่างไรให้ได้ด้วยซึ่งมันแยกกันคนละส่วนกับเรื่องของคุณทักษิณแต่ละพรรคการเมืองก็ต้องยืนยันในส่วนจุดนี้ให้ชัดว่าคุณมาทำการเมืองเพื่อการเป็นผู้แทนประชาชนทำเพื่อผลประโยชน์ของประชาชนไม่ใช่การเอื้อผลประโยชน์พวกเดียวกันเองค่ะ
So the ongoing debate, would Thaksin come back or not, what will happen, it's really up to him. I don't really care. But each parties have to offer a stand about this issue. And people, the elected officials have to represent the people. This should be a separate matter, representing people's interests rather than individuals. But parties have to make clear as well what their stand on this issue. Okay. All right, Jantina, you want to add something? I mean, I was going to ask you about Thaksin as well, but I think both other panelists have covered a lot. But what do you see, the shadow of the Shinawatra?
Just a little bit. I agree with everything she said. I agree with everything she said. I would just add just a little bit from another side. I mean, this Thaksin conundrum, the Thaksin hang-up, has hovered over Thai politics for the last 2 decades, right? And that's when the early critics and skeptics of the elected authoritarian regime. In those days, they were called the Thaksin regime. There are books and articles written about this. But over the years, I've learned something. All of this is not about Thaksin. Thaksin is incidental and certainly part and parcel of it, but it's about Thai people. And I think that we should let Thai people decide. And what Kun Pasrawali has just said is really, it's a very different, they have moved on from Thaksin. It's not like Thaksin is a great guy or should be invited back, but there are other matters to focus on. So I think that the question to me is not about, yes, I think what Kunapasi said about lessons being learned, but I think there are different lessons that should be learned. Yes, of course, if you asked me this 15 years ago, I would have a different answer. I think Thaksin was really 2007, 2008. Yeah, I think the turnaround was maybe the December 2007 election. You have to listen to people. They've decided this, let them run the country. But they were overthrown. And then 2011 again, and then 2013, 14, overthrown. And there were, by the way, I have to say, there were 2 boycotts of the election. When a leading opposition party boycotts an election, you can have a crisis in any country. In any country. And it happened again in 2014, 2013 in December. Remember the amnesty bill was the big problem, of course. Yingluck went past midway of her term. Looked like she might even go a full term. And then bang, I think it was October 31st, in the wee hours, amnesty bill was promulgated in Parliament. And of course, spontaneous protests and so on. But she dissolved the lower house. There was supposed to be an election to let people decide. That election had no chance because people were prevented from voting and registering. So the election then became null and void. So what I'm saying is that what Kun Mai has said is exactly the point. The future of Thailand is about the agenda on offer, how to lead the country forward. Thaksin, no Thaksin. Look at the Thaksin enemies and opponents. They're the same lot, right? If you can shine a light through the military and traditional institutions and what they do, and we shine the same light with Thaksin, well, at least we can shine a light through Thaksin. We can't take the people to task for ordering a submarine for no good use with no engine, or using military resources and budgets and all kinds of abuses, and this government running up a huge bill, a deficit of over, this is very serious, over 5 trillion baht, right? So we're talking about this government has been running a deficit over $10 billion a year, every year. So give me an agenda, and we'll tackle the corruption and everything else. Agenda that people can vote for, and let the people decide.
Yeah, can I just
Sure,
be
please.
clear? I have said right at the start, I wanted these elections to go beyond about Thaksin.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Number 2, the whole Thaksin issue is coming back, not because of anyone else, but because of what Thaksin and the Pheu Thai have been saying, which is what worries a lot of people. And lastly, I would say, I just said that Prayut and the senators are probably the biggest vote getters for Pheu Thai. Well, Thaksin is the biggest vote getter for Prayut.
Fair enough.
Why are we stuck in this? And I want the country to move on.
Thank you, Krab. Please, we're going to go to the Q&A. Please introduce yourself and which panelist you're directing your question to. Thanks.
Yeah, Marwan Makan Mark of Nicasia. Thanks very much to Prime Minister Abhisit for gracing the FCC. It is good to see him back. Ajahn Thitinan, you listed some of the more colorful ways in which governments have been stopped in their tracks, but you forgot the circumstances that happened in December of 2008 when Army Chief Anupong plotted the defection of MPs in the army barracks, and MPs were locked in the Pullman Hotel until the deal was through to prevent Thaksin from intervening and trying to buy the MPs over. But my question here is this. All three of you have been talking about an election to be held. I have heard from some circles that an election will not be held. 10% chance already. And the reason why we need to address this question is after the 2006 coup, the army generals were dissatisfied with the outcome and they wanted a much more hardline coup. And they got it in 2014, and at the time, they were quite happy to close down the country. They felt there was not going to be any economic price for the country. I mean, have these people learned a lesson 9 years later? That's my question. Thanks.
Okay, who do you want to ask first? No, Mike.
A very good question, Marwan. I actually have been thinking of the worst case scenarios. In fact, the collective attention and effort in this room could help avert that kind of scenario, which is to not have election. You know, in Myanmar, they had an election in November 2020. February 1st, 2021, the military unplugged the country, unplugged a decade of reform, opening, progress, and then they have now a civil war because of young people who tasted that decade with rising expectations and unwilling to submit and to give in to the military dictatorship. In Thailand, I've been thinking, what could be the worst case? Could they really unplug Thailand? Unplug meaning, the agenda we're seeing. We haven't seen this kind of agenda before. The 112 proposal is, we're talking like this today. A few months from now, we could have a real crisis. The 112 proposal is very strong for Thailand. In other countries, it'd just be kind of maybe, just a normal, ordinary, progressive agenda. Reform the military, get rid of the draft, but make it transparent, the budget more transparent, professionalize it, weapons procurement, this and that. Security sector reform is written in the textbooks. This is very big for the military. I think that they must be saying a lot of stuff among themselves. And then you 112, the three provisions, the three proposals that it contains, this is very slippery. If this comes to pass, it can open the dam gates. So that's why I think move forward, in fact, is a party, like the name suggests, is a party of the future. They're not hoping to be in government this time. They're running on a decade horizon. They did it last time they got dissolved. Party to get dissolved, brand new party, 0 established MP, they're still together. So I think that they'll be in opposition. I think that the cost is very high. But if this existential threat poses itself along the lines of your question, then I would worry about worst case scenarios. I would not dismiss, I would not put it beyond the traditional institutions to take matters into their own hands and bear any price, put up with any burden, journalists, investors, whatever, to maintain the regime.
Any answer? น้องใหม่ตอบไหมเรื่องปฏิวัติ
หนูว่าเขาจริงๆเขาไม่ได้สนหรอกค่ะว่าปิดประเทศไปแล้วมันเศรษฐกิจมันพังเนี่ยแล้วเขาจะไม่ทำรัฐประหารอีกหนูคิดว่าเขาไม่ได้สนนะคะทุกๆครั้งที่เกิดการรัฐประหารรัฐบาลทหารมักจะออกกฎหมายออกมาชุดหนึ่งที่มันจะเป็นการจัดสรรทรัพยากรอย่างเช่นนโยบายทวงคืนผืนป่าหรือก่อนหน้านั้นก็อย่างเช่นเรื่องของ นโยบายเรื่องของพลังงานไฟฟ้าอะไรอย่างเงี้ยนะคะซึ่งเราเห็นในทุกๆครั้งตลอดค่ะว่าเขามีกลไกในการจัดการว่าเขาจะดีลกับนายทุนใหญ่อย่างไร เพื่อให้พวกเขายังสามารถที่จะกระทำการยึดอำนาจลักษณะนั้นอยู่ต่อไปได้นะคะซึ่งเขาอาจจะไม่ได้สนแต่หมายคิดว่าส่วนหนึ่งที่เขาควรจะต้องเรียนรู้คือตั้งแต่63ที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยเราเข็ดหลาบมากนะคะหมายถึงประชาชนเนี่ยคนรุ่นใหม่ค่อนข้างเข็ดหลาบมากกับการรัฐประหารหลายคนไม่สามารถกลับมาลืมตาอ้าปากได้เลยหลายคนพ่อแม่ธุรกิจพังพวกเขาไม่สามารถกลับมาใช้ชีวิตแบบเดิมได้อีกเลยซึ่งมันก็ส่งผลให้การต่อสู้ของคนรุ่นใหม่ค่ะมักจะพ่วงมาด้วยการที่บอกว่าถ้าหากเมื่อไหร่ที่มีการรัฐประหารอีกครั้งพวกเราจะออกมาต่อต้านอย่างเต็มที่ไม่ว่าพวกเราจะมีอะไรอยู่ในมือหรือไม่มีอะไรอยู่ในมือเราก็จะออกมายืนอยู่หน้าบ้านเพื่อยืนประจันหน้ากับรถถังถ้าเขาเอารถถังออกมายืนประจันหน้ากับทหารที่จะมายึดอำนาจประชาชนซึ่งมายเองก็จะเป็นส่วนหนึ่งที่จะออกมาต่อต้านการรัฐประหารด้วยเช่นเดียวกันถ้าหากมันเกิดขึ้นค่ะ
So let me translate. I don't think they care if they have damaged the economy or the country. I don't think they're deep down they don't really care. And every time there's a coup, they usually issue laws, whether it's about forest land or about energy, to deal with the tycoons to ensure their security. So one thing that they should learn from 2020 though is that young people are sick of coups, and many have been really affected by the previous coup, and they can't come back to have their livelihoods. So young people, will fight. If there's a coup, they will come out and oppose it, and face the military in front of their house or wherever they bring out the tanks. We will face it, and I'll be one of them standing in front of those tanks. Please.
I thought the question was about whether there's a possibility of no elections.
Yeah, that's another part of the question. Is that
What reason would there be for not having elections?
Extraordinary circumstances. It's a nice time.
Sorry?
It's a nice time.
I can't see any convincing reason to say no elections. And the only way it could be done is, of course, if there is a coup, even before the elections. And it would take quite an extraordinary turn of events, which I don't know. I just don't think it's that easy to create that kind of circumstances. But if you ask whether the people who think about these things care about the economy, care about foreign perception or so on, my answer would be the same, that I don't think they do. But I also believe that in a significant way, the fact that there has been a movement from young people over the last 2-3 years have, I think, added a new dimension into the calculus, into the equation, because in the old days, when the coups happened, it seems that there was one group of politicians fighting each other. But now it's clear, as Maya just said, that the young people are moving beyond the old divide, but they bring something new to the table. And while I think the ultra-right, ultra-conservatives will have a stronger reaction, I think many people who are the powers that be, who are influential in those circles, will also, I think, be wise enough to know that doing things the old ways will create massive risks for the establishment. Much bigger risk than in the past.
Kun Pichaiครับ
Thank you. As a former editor of the Bangkok Post and currently advisor to Frontier Myanmar, I have a question for Prime Minister Apisit. I lean towards the suspicion of an accommodation between Pheu Thai and Kun Prawit's party. My question is, if that accommodation does eventuate, do you think there will be a real attempt for structural changes that are necessary for this country. Will that happen?
Will the structural change?
Will they make structural changes that we need in this country, economic or whatever? That's for Kun Apisit. The second question, if I may address to a panel generally. I agree with Ajahn Thitinan that this election is a little different in the sense that the role of the younger generation becoming more proactive, raising issues that we've never thought would be able to be discussed before the monarchy, for example, changes and all that. But in the end, the bottom line for Thais is Pak Thong. ไม่ใช่ not ประชาธิปไตยหรือรัฐธรรมนูญ คือปากท้อง And if, excuse me, for Thais, it's basically issues of economy for the majority of Thais, not people in Bangkok. And if the election is, it doesn't go according, the majority, the result is not respected by the establishment. I'm glad you will come out and protest, but I believe that Thais will not revolt. The majority of Thais will not revolt. They want reform. And Kun Hapisit has answered my question partly that the elite, we hope, will recognize that. Do you agree with him? That's my question.
Maybe, Prime Minister, if you want to address the first question, and then I'll translate.
Yeah, I said in my remarks that this marriage of convenience between Pheu Thai and General Prawit, there's nothing now on the table about structural change. Now, it's possible that they may adopt it after, but I wouldn't be sure that they would head in that direction. The one thing they might pull off is this compromise whereby they may actually succeed in bringing Thaksin home without the instability. That could be something that could be achieved maybe. But I think it comes at a cost where it's clear that Pheu Thai has completely distanced itself from the Move Forward Party in achieving that. I'm not sure your second question is addressed to. Yeah.
ก็อาจารย์หรือว่าน้องใหม่ก็ได้นะแล้วแต่ Okay.
หนูอาจจะขอเสริมในมุมของหนูนิดนึงละกันค่ะหนูคิดว่าจากที่เราเห็นการเคลื่อนไหวของคนรุ่นใหม่ตั้งแต่63ที่ผ่านมาค่ะหลายๆคนตั้งต้นจากการที่เห็นปัญหาเรื่องปากท้องนั่นแหละค่ะแต่สุดท้ายเขาเริ่มเข้าใจแล้วว่าปากท้องกับเสรีภาพมันต้องไปด้วยกันพวกเขาเริ่มเข้าใจแล้วว่าเขาจะแก้ปัญหาปากท้องให้ยั่งยืนได้ก็ต่อเมื่อเขาเปลี่ยนแปลงโครงสร้างให้มันมีข้อกำหนดและกติกาที่มันแฟร์ต่อพวกเขาทุกคนมีพื้นที่ให้พวกเขาออกมายืนได้กันอย่างเสมอหน้ามาคิดว่าส่วนนี้เป็นสิ่งที่สังคมเรากำลังเริ่มทำความเข้าใจมันขึ้นเรื่อยๆแล้วค่ะและนั่นแหละคือเหตุผลที่ว่าทำไมเราถึงมุ่งเป้าไปที่นโยบายเรื่องของโครงสร้างมากกว่าการแก้ปัญหาเฉพาะหน้าแต่ว่าก็ไม่ใช่ว่าไม่สนใจนะคะ
Just a quick translation. Just to add my voice, if you see the movement in 2020, it actually emerged from the beginning from economic pain. And eventually there's an understanding that economic pain has to go hand in hand with democratic changes. And the conditions have to be fair. So essentially, this is where we understand this particular issue. We're also concerned with the economy as well. But I think this is important that the focus of the policy going forward has to be about structural changes.
Again, I agree with everything she just said. I just add a small thing. I mean, it's a myth, if the Prayut-led military government and coalition government over the last 8 years, 9 years has being able to expand the economy 5 to 6% a year, I think a lot of people will still be upset with him, his regime, the way it's been run, a lot of violations of basic rights and freedoms, and so on and so on. So as she said, Khun Mai said, yes, prosperity is one thing. It's necessary but not sufficient. The other thing I was going to say about this, the structural reforms that Khun Apisit talked about, and the potential compromise between the Pheu Thai, PPRP, one of the biggest ironies in Thai politics is that Thaksin is very pro-monarchy. This is why, even though he was kicked out on allegations of populism and disloyalty to the crown and this and that, but at the end of the day, he hasn't touched, the Pheu Thai Party has not touched 112 monarchy. They do talk about constitutional revision, constitutional amendment, constitutional reform, maybe rewriting the constitution, more participatory, representative. But that inevitably will impinge on the monarchy. But for them, it's kicking the can down the road and letting the Constitution Assembly decide on that. So I think that the rules are so rigged. We are so stuck. It'll just be already a big, huge achievement and relief just to change the government, right? If it has to be Pheu Thai and Palang Pracharat, I mean, Kun Prawit, when I see Prawit, I don't think it's him. I think it's like the people around him telling him, hey, boss, brother, we got to do this. I mean, he can't walk straight, and he doesn't come across as a very ambitious person. But in Parliament, remember that one time they had a debate, and they said, he got up and said, people keep saying I staged the coup, No, it's this guy over here, and then Prayut raised his hand, right? So that's something I think that Pheu Thai, Thaksin people can sell, can go with, and maybe can sell to their base. So it's very possible, I think, this kind of compromise that could lead to maybe incremental but significant and qualitative change in government performance, in running the country, and directing Thailand's immediate future wouldn't be a bad thing. And I think the established centers of power, this is a godsend for them under these circumstances. If they want to get the Prayut back, so there are 3 ways it's going to happen, right? The current regime, the coalition, Prayut and all Prawit and all these they win big enough, and with the help from the Senate, they retake power, they maintain power. That's the ideal. The likelier is that Pheu Thai is going to win big. It's going to lead to coalition. Who with? Maybe Palang Pracharat, very likely. That will split the Senate vote. That will kind of diffuse, dilute the Senate influence a bit, and maybe press the wedge deeper into the Prayut rift, and then maybe Phumjai Thai as well. So that kind of compromise, whether they come up with what kind of reforms, I still already think is a big achievement. Now the third way, unlikely, would be the Pheu Thai move forward kind of coalition. Not because it's not good. I just think it's before its time. I think eventually, my hope, and I think it can happen this way, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, the future of Thai politics, Pheu Thai will be the center-right party. Move forward will be the center-left party. That will be the future we want.
Okay. Well, first of all, about the bread and butter issue and the structural changes. I mean, there are so many structural challenges, and a lot have been said already about the Constitution. And you have to remember, during the last election, all but one party promised that they would amend the Constitution or rewrite the Constitution. And it couldn't get through, simply because it's blocked by the Senate. And I think many people are now almost resigned to the fact that you have to wait until there's a new Senate in place where this can really move ahead. So I mean, I think that's a pity, but I've talked to people who were active on this issue. They now seem to be saying, well, let's wait for the new Senate, rather than trying to bang your head against the current one that has blocked it so many times. Already been discussed about the issue about the monarchy and how distance between move forward and Pheu Thai. I was surprised Kun Tinan saying even now classifies Pheu Thai as a pro-monarchy party. So, but the other issues, I think, will be forced upon political parties as time goes on anyway. But, and you shouldn't underestimate how these issues still matter because of the polarization. So I think Pheu Thai has been successful in painting the poor economic performance over the last 8 years as a result of a non-democratic system. So they've convinced a lot of people that it is time to somehow get rid of the legacy of the coup so the economy can move forward. And certainly young people are taking up a number of new issues to challenge all political parties anyway. And again, I would say that, people sometimes say, oh, elections are always won on, the state of the economy or bread and butter issue. In a very polarized setting, that's just not the case. I mean, you talk to somebody who intends to vote for General Prayut, there's nothing about the economy, nothing about the policies. They're just voting for General Prayut to keep Thaksin out. So, there are a number of economic policies where one party might, have a better set of proposals, but the voters are looking at the bigger picture about whether they want a change of government, and they will go with that.
Okay. I'll give you 2 more questions and then we can close this. Please.
Thank you. I am Metha Matkhaw from Campaign for Popular Democracy and Thai Civil Society. I would like to ask some question by Thai and Kun Phanu maybe translate for me. Maybe
โอเคได้ครับได้ครับเชิญเลย
3-4 คำถามนะครับกับวิทยากรซึ่งคิดว่าเป็นโจทย์การเมืองไทยแต่ว่าฟังมาแล้วมันอาจจะเหลือแค่ 2-3 คำถาม
โอเค
คือภาพรวมข้อที่ 1 ก็คือว่าการเมืองไทยในการเลือกตั้งครั้งหน้านี้นะครับอันนี้เป็นคำถามจากคุณแจนเฮดดีไดอะล็อกด้วยประชาชนจะเลือกเชิงยุทธศาสตร์ได้อย่างไรให้มีการเปลี่ยนแปลงเพราะฟังเมื่อกี้คือว่าพลเอกประยุทธ์และพลเอกประวิตรมีโอกาสในโจทย์การเมืองไทยปัจจุบันและคำถามนี้พ่วงว่าเขาเล่นละครกันอยู่หรือเปล่าวิทยากรทั้ง3ท่านเท่าที่ประเมินว่าใครมาก็ได้แล้วก็ทั้ง3ท่านก็อยู่แต่ภาคประชาชนอย่างน้องไมค์ก็คัดค้านทั้ง3 ป.ข้อที่ 2โจทย์การเมืองไทยยังติดหล่มเรื่องสวจะมาเลือกนายกอยู่และทั้ง2ท่านนี้ก็คาดหวังว่าสวจะเลือกตนเองและใช้โจทย์การเลือกตั้งแบบ62แม้ว่าเพื่อไทยจะแลนด์สไลด์หรือไม่ก็ตามเราจะแก้โจทย์สวเลือกนายกได้อย่างไรนี่ข้อที่2นะครับในเชิงการรณรงค์ด้วยถามท่านนายกด้วยและทุกท่านด้วยนะครับข้อ3คือมันมีประเด็นว่าหลังการเลือกตั้ง14 พฤษภาคมนะครับมันควรประกาศการเลือกตั้งเร็วได้โดยกกต.และเครือข่ายแล้วรับรองแล้วก็เลือกนายกเลือกรัฐบาลแต่ไทม์ไลน์ช้าสุดทำไมไปถึงสิงหาคมถึงจะได้รัฐบาลใหม่คือสามารถเลือกนายกเลือกรัฐบาลใหม่เร็วๆได้ไหมเพื่อที่จะแก้ไขปัญหาการเมืองไทยที่มันเว้นวรรคนะครับซึ่งนิดนึงคือถ้าเลือกช้ามันเป็นช่องว่างให้ฝ่ายอำนาจนิยมให้ต่อรองแล้วก็จะได้การเมืองแบบเดิมนะครับฝากไว้ 3-4 ข้อครับ
So basically, I mean, you guys understand the question, but I'm just translating from the floor. How can people vote strategically to affect change? Is Prayut and Prawit play acting? This wisharoo is just an act? How do you get over the Senate's power of choosing the PM, since the Senate would likely side with the 2 generals anyway? And I think the last question is the most important one. Why is the timeline outlined by whether it's Deputy Prime Minister Wisanu or the Election Commission? Why is the timeline for the next government formation taking such a long time? I think that's I think that's a very big question. I think any of you can take a poke at these questions. You don't have to answer everything, but it's up to you. You want to go, Prime Minister?
Okay. The first one, I already mentioned that I believe that there will be what I call tactical voting anyway. And I think Pheu Thai has played that very cleverly, because when there was speculation about a Pheu Thai Prawit alliance, they got challenged by the Move Forward supporters and saying, "What can you just, stick with the democratic side?" And Pheu Thai's answer was, "Well, if we get more than 310, we won't need Prawit." So I think on the opposition side, the tide will be moving towards Pheu Thai. On the coalition side, likewise, I think for people who might vote Phum Jai Thai and Democrat, will be tempted in the final days to vote for Prayut to strengthen his hand. So I think that's going to happen naturally anyway. You recall the the governor of Bangkok elections? The funny thing was the government side talks a lot about tactical voting, asking all their supporters to use tactical voting, but it never happened. Kun Chat never talked about it, but got tactical voting 100%. So it will happen naturally. That's my answer. The second issue about the Senate, I still have not heard any senator coming out to say they will sort of vote with respect to the election results. And it seems that the only deviation from last time, where they unanimously voted for Prayut, appears to be this belief that General Prawit controls maybe 80, 60, 80, 100, depending on you believe, senators that will not vote the same way. You ask whether the two are play acting in splitting. Well, I think it's all General Prawit's strategy for his political survival and gains. And General Prayut cannot do much about it. It doesn't mean they can't work together, but General Prawit has options. Right. And the timeline, this is a question for the Election Commission. It's just the fact that they have 60 days to verify the results. That's why it can take so long. But I think if the election results are clear, there'll be under tremendous pressure to just verify the results, because it's going to take a lot of fraud and charges, and then yellow and red cards to change the election results. So they'll be under a lot of pressure if the elections are clear to certify the results quickly.
Anyone else?
In 2011, the results were pretty clear, so it didn't take too long. 2019, closer margin, took longer, very tricky. This time, if the vote is pretty clear who wins and win by a large margin, I think you just have to keep up the pressure and maintain the vigilance on the Election Commission, because they're always up to something. Now, the SWA, I think the tactical voting, I do agree, but I think that there'll be some split ballots. Certainly, people who are going to vote for Pheu Thai or move forward, they're not going to vote for the Palang Pracharat or the UTN, right? And largely vice versa. So I wouldn't be surprised with some split ballots. The move forward base, pretty steady, but so there's some cannibalizing, and in the run-up into towards the last turn, it'll be critical at that time, the last few days, and I think on the government side, I'm not sure if people will, like 2019, flock and gravitate to General Prayut to keep Thaksin out as much as last time. Last time, I think the margins were closer. They had a Senate, had a new constitution. This time, lackluster performance. Some people might stay home, might lose a few votes. and the gravitational pull of General Prayut is much weaker, and you can see from the campaign, some speeches and the turnout and so on, that he's a little bit more desperate than last time.
ขออนุญาตตอบแค่ข้อแรกละกันค่ะในเรื่องของการโหวตเชิงยุทธศาสตร์เนี่ยไม่คิดว่าไม่อาจจะพยายามนิยามเขาว่าโหวตเชิงยุทธศาสตร์ในความเข้าใจของตัวเองด้วยนะคะว่าท่านที่ถามกำลังพูดถึงในมุมไหนนะคะแต่ว่าการโหวตเชิงยุทธศาสตร์ที่ดีที่สุดในตอนนี้คือการโหวตตามความต้องการของตัวเองว่าเราอยากจะได้ผู้แทนแบบไหนไปเป็นตัวแทนเราคนที่มีแนวทางการทำงานหรือว่านโยบายแบบใดที่จะแก้ปัญหาสิ่งที่เรากำลังพบเจออยู่นั่นต่างหากคือการโหวตยุทธศาสตร์แบบที่ประชาชนต้องยึดถือไว้ซึ่งถ้าแต่ละพรรคการเมืองสามารถที่จะแสดงจุดยืนให้ข้อมูลอย่างครบถ้วนให้กับพี่น้องประชาชนได้ตัดสินใจแล้วเนี่ยแล้วพี่น้องประชาชนได้ตัดสินใจบนข้อมูลที่เขาได้รับรู้อย่างรอบคอบแล้วเนี่ยนั่นก็อาจจะส่งผลทำให้สสส่วนมากที่เข้าไปในสภาหรือว่าได้รับเลือกผ่านหลังการเลือกตั้งเนี่ยก็เป็นสสที่ประชาชนเองก็ให้ความไว้เนื้อเชื่อใจและมั่นใจกับพวกเขาได้แล้วก็อาจจะหมายถึงการที่บอกว่าประชาชนสสเหล่านั้นจะเป็นสสที่จะยืนอยู่ข้างประชาชนและทำเพื่อประชาชนด้วยหรือเปล่าซึ่งถ้าจะบอกว่าอะไรคือยุทธศาสตร์ไม่คงไม่สามารถที่จะตอบได้มากนักค่ะแต่ว่าไม่คิดว่าสิ่งที่คาดหวังคือเราอยากเห็นสสที่ทำเพื่อประชาชนและมุ่งหวังจริงๆที่จะทำงานโดยปราศจากผลประโยชน์ส่วนตัวและมองผลประโยชน์ของประชาชนเป็นหลักอย่างนั้นมากกว่าค่ะมันถึงจะได้รัฐสภาในอนาคตที่มันจะขับเคลื่อนประเทศไปข้างหน้าได้ค่ะ
I will answer only the first question on the tactical vote, and based on my understanding of what tactical vote is, I think the best tactical vote is what you vote for what you want in your representative that can address the issues that each of us face. If each party can show clearly their policies, then the people can decide, and the people believe in these policies, they will vote in their representative. I think this is the only tactical vote that really matters, and we need to see this in the work so we have parliament that truly represent the people and can drive the country forward. Okay, Phil.
Hi. Philip Sherwell with the Sunday Times. Thank you, everyone. Kun Mind, Jay, for your takes. Kun Apisit, it's great to have a Prime Minister here again. An old friend, as Panu said. You've spoken, Kun Apisit, about your analysis of Pheu Thai, Thaksin, Prayut, Prawit to move forward. I'd like to actually ask you about your politics, your personal politics, your party politics. You noted that you're not running in this election, but you remain a member of the Democrat Party. The Democrats were seen back in the 1990s as a great hope for liberal, progressive politics in this country. By 2019, you were standing aside from the party because they were supporting coup leaders to remain in government. How would you assess your party's performance as part of this government over the last 4 years? And what might bring you to decide to end your sabbatical and return to politics in Thailand?
Oh, wow. Okay. In fact, I'm not running to avoid answering questions about the party. But since you asked, I guess I have to give an answer. I think what the party was thinking back in 2019 was that the politics is polarized. The people who had supported the Democrats for 2-3 elections previous to the last one have deserted and supported Palang Pracharat in big number. And so they were afraid to isolate this side of the polarization further and decided to join the coalition. And now you will hear that the party leaders are trying to run on their achievements in government without saying much about the political position and standing. Okay? I'm just a member. I have to respect that, but I'm not willing to run on a party list because I retain my belief when I felt that 2019 was an opportunity for us to step out of that zone. The problem had been, as you say, that back in the 90s, we were seen as a liberal and rather progressive force. But through our conflicts with the Thaksin party, which is a different thing altogether, a populist party and authoritarian when they're in power, somehow our supporters took that as a top priority, fighting Thaksin rather than fighting what Thaksin stood for. And one of the incredible things that I experienced is, when I came out and said I did not support General Prayut, part of the reason was that, as Ajahn Thitinan said, his behavior is no different from what we were fighting against Thaksin about, in terms of corruption, in terms of interference with the independent organizations, and also abuses of rights, and so on. I was, disappointed to find that many of our supporters sort of say, well, that doesn't matter, so long as Prayut continues to fight Thaksin. And you will notice that Prayut continues to be the most popular candidate on this side of the political divide. I think the current party leadership is afraid to step out of that zone, which is different from my thinking. And so that leads to the second question. Well, I think I remain with the Democrat Party because I feel that it is probably the only party, certainly up to now, that has been able to evolve beyond personalities and group of personalities as a political party. I have mentioned that now we're being challenged by the Move Forward, who has an opportunity to do the same, whereas other parties are still trapped or tied to personalities. So I remain with the Democrat Party in the hope that this institution will evolve, will carve out a new political space to represent something, and finally move beyond the years that we've been fighting Thaksin. And in fact, for me, to do that, it's just basically getting back to our roots. Maybe, as you said, in the 90s, or even actually at the time when the party was founded, where there was a clear declaration of what we stood for.
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, then I would like to ask one final, a very short answer from the last question for this panel. Geopolitics, you look around in the neighborhood, illiberal regimes are on the rise, liberal democracy is in retreat, especially in this part of the world. How do you see Thailand's faith in democratic process going forward, this election and beyond? The world is changing. What do you think about Thai belief and faith in democracy?
There's a rich and growing literature on the democratic recession and democratic rollbacks and reversals. When I said that this election is very important for Thailand, also more broadly, its outcome is important for the region. And the region, Southeast Asia, has suffered setbacks. The most heinous, of course, is Myanmar. In Cambodia, we have an elected dictatorship, but it's a mixed bag. I think the President Bongbong Marcos was legitimately elected, running a government, being better received. So it's a mixed bag in Southeast Asia. So for Thailand, has always been the the litmus case is pivotal case because in the 1990s, would you believe it or not, in the late 1990s, the literature in political science and of the world, they said that Thailand was a leading democratic democratizing country after the 1997 constitution. And since then, we've had a series of setbacks. So I think these elections, if we can regain our footing and become a democratically elected government that is running the country rather than kind of a military-backed, concocted rules and constitution, then it could be a bit of a momentum generator, Kun Panu, for the region as well and for the wider battle between autocratization and democratization. And my last comment is this. I would like to invite everyone to join me in applauding, thank you, Kun Panu, for not just organizing, moderating, but translating this whole event. It's really a lot of work. I've done this kind of work. Thank you very much.
น้องมายมาได้เดิน Prime Minister น้องมายมาก่อนคิดว่าเรื่องความมั่นใจเรื่องประชาธิปไตยของคนไทย
ไม่มั่นใจในความหวังค่ะไม่มั่นใจในความที่มนุษย์ทุกคนมีหวังเสมอแล้วณปัจจุบันนี้สังคมได้สะท้อนให้เห็นแล้วว่าการเมืองไทยมันจะไม่มีวันเหมือนเดิมอีกต่อไปแล้วโครงสร้างที่ณตอนนี้เราพูดถึงเราสามารถพูดถึงมันได้อย่างเต็มปากเต็มคำทั้งนั้นที่เราเปลี่ยนระบอบการปกครองมาตั้งเกือบ100 ปีแล้วเนี่ยณตอนนี้เราสามารถพูดถึงมันได้อย่างเต็มปากเต็มคำแล้วค่ะเราสามารถที่จะตั้งคำถามต่อโครงสร้างอำนาจที่เป็นต้นตอที่จะหยุดชะงักไม่ให้เราเดินไปไหนได้เราสามารถที่จะสงสัยต่ออำนาจของเราเองว่าในระบอบประชาธิปไตยแบบนี้แท้จริงแล้วเรามีอำนาจมากน้อยแค่ไหนเท่าที่เป็นอยู่มันไม่พอสำหรับเราหรือเปล่าไม่คิดว่าความสงสัยการตั้งคำถามเหล่านี้มันสร้างความหวังให้เราเดินหน้าต่อเพื่อทำอย่างไรก็ได้ให้ประชาชนกลับมามีอำนาจดังที่ตามถูกกำหนดไว้ตามระบอบการปกครองที่บอกว่าเป็นประชาธิปไตยด้วยค่ะเพราะฉะนั้นหมายคิดว่ายังไงก็แล้วแต่มันคงไม่มีวันกลับไปเหมือนเดิมแล้วค่ะหลังจากนี้มันมีแต่ว่าเราต้องสานต่อมันต่อไปเรื่อยๆและทำให้มันชัดเจนมากขึ้นว่าอำนาจในประเทศนี้มันเป็นของใครกันแน่แล้วก็ต้องย้ำเตือนกันว่ามันเป็นของประชาชนค่ะ
I believe in hope. All humans have hope. And right now in Thai politics, will not be the same judging by what had happened. We now can speak about structural problems, structural issues. We can raise questions that we have not been able to do before. And we can ask ourselves about how much power we have as the people. So, and I think this creates hope ultimately. And I think we cannot turn back. And this will make things going forward. And, we have to ensure that the power in this land, it belongs to the people. Prime Minister, your parting words, sir.
I don't know why you can expect a short answer to that question. But let me make three quick points. Geopolitics. I think we have to be clear that the last couple of decades, in the background has been the rise of China. And this lure of perhaps an alternative model to democracy. Now, I think with the current situation in China, with the war in the Ukraine, I believe that the democratic recession of the last couple of decades might just about to hit bottom. And the peak, if you like, of more authoritarian governments maybe now on a downward slope. So I think geopolitically, I think that's the case. Partly because I believe it will be extremely difficult for China to replicate the same level of success it has enjoyed over the last 2 decades, given the policies and the changing circumstances. The second point is I think young people are the ones that will be determining the future. I think here in Thailand, they are clear where they stand. So I think there'll be an added push. And, each year that passes by, you've got new voters and more active citizens coming along that will push in that direction. My third point is I remember somebody from a university was doing a thesis on this and came to me and asked about who wins in the end between democracy and authoritarian leaders. And I say, well, democracy is never smooth. It will have its peak and trough. It can collapse. But I don't know any dictator that can last. So my answer is eventually, with the common aspiration of every human being, the democratic forces are more powerful.
Well, with that inspiring note, I'd like to thank all three of our distinguished panelists for sharing their thoughts today, and thank you everyone for coming. And I hope that if you enjoy this kind of events, please, if you're not already, become a member. The FCCT is a home of course, free speech, and we pride ourselves in that. We want to create a free-flowing discussion and forum here, and throughout leading to this election, we hope to host more events like this so that we can deep dive into different issues around Thailand and beyond. Thank you, and good night. ขอบคุณมากนะครับน้องนายพี่บุญคุณมากเลย